tore him apart. Blame him for challenging you, for not looking away and for not backing down when you pulled out the gun. Blame your mother for bringing you into this world when she was but a kid herself and for dragging you up, not bringing you up. Blame society for not giving you hope. Blame your father for not being there, the man who looked after himself instead of looking after you. Blame the gun in your hand for making you a target, for making you more likely to be picked on. Blame the dead boy, blame your mother, blame society, blame your father, blame the gun, blame anyone but yourself for not being strong enough to put down the gun, to break the cycle.
Hi, I'm Tom Morello. Some call me the Night Watchman. In the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal is at a crucial stage. Please go to freemumia.com to find out more information about how you can help Mumia Abu-Jamal and other political prisoners. Night Watchman out.
Stay tuned to We Act Radio, Washington, D.C.'s only independent radio station. Catch us online at weactradio.com.
They were saying when they think you cannot hear. If you understood what they do, if for you it was so clear. If you knew they shut down the factory in an economic ruse. If you could kiss the cheek of the child in the sweatshop that made your shoes. Every time we went to war to fight our evil foes, they told you we were really fighting for the good of CEOs. If you could feel the hunger of the many, see the riches of the few. If they told it like it is, what if you knew?
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese.
And today we're talking about Monsanto.
Oh, you know, I get a visceral reaction from Monsanto. I gotta say, we got some great guests on it, though. It's gonna be really excellent.
Yeah, but first, a little bit of news. Do you want to talk about the ongoing struggle to close Guantanamo?
Over 100 people now in Guantanamo are on a hunger strike, and there's a solidarity hunger strike in Washington, D.C. Diane Wilson, a longtime Veterans for Peace and Code Pink activist, is in Washington, and she will be in the White House today at noon. She's in her 11th day of a hunger strike.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we're going to see more and more solidarity protests like this because people are getting the message that this injustice is continuing, and Obama can end it. That's the real important message.
The power is completely in his hands.
Obama's blamed it on Congress, but Congress actually gave him a way out. They just have to certify it and give Congress notice and close it up.
Right, right. And also, coming next week in Washington, D.C., Home Defenders League is bringing lots of activists for a week of protest against the big banks who have been illegally foreclosing and fraudulently making loans. It's called Bring Justice to Justice. Wall Street Accountability Week of Action. You can find out more at homedefendersleague.org, and we'll have them on the show on May 20th.
It's also on our website, occupywashingtondc.org.
That's right. That's right. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first guest today is Ronnie Cummins.
Yay!
I know. We're excited to have him. He's the founder and director of the Organic Consumers Association, a nonprofit U.S.-based network of 850,000 consumers dedicated to safeguarding organic standards and promoting a healthy, just, and sustainable system of agriculture and commerce. Ronnie also has the distinction of being the head of the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, for the Green Shadow Cabinet.
I wonder how he likes the food czar for Obama.
Well, that's our first question. Good morning, Ronnie.
Well, good to be with you.
Thank you for taking time to join us. So our first question is, what do you think of our food czar, Michael Taylor, past Vice President of Public Policy for Monsanto?
Well, I think Michael Taylor represents one of the major problems in American democracy. That is, we don't really have a democracy anymore. We have a corporatocracy.
Yeah.
Right.
What Monsanto and other corporations have managed to do is create a revolving door whereby their employees work for them for a while and then revolve into prominent government positions, such as Michael Taylor, who's twice revolved into the FDA. They sit in the case of the FDA in a powerful regulatory commission. Michael Taylor was the engineer in the early 1990s of the policy that genetically engineered foods are substantially equivalent to non-genetically engineered foods, and therefore they don't have to be labeled. This basically created the preconditions for Monsanto and the biotech industry to tamper with our food supply, plant genetically engineered crops all over the United States. Now 41% of all U.S. cropland are genetically engineered.
Wow.
And put these mutant genes into our food supply with absolutely no safety testing or labeling required.
You know, I found that they put them as a food czar to be really obnoxious because that avoided the whole Senate confirmation process. So you can't create this kind of extra constitutional position. It's really it's a powerful position, and you don't even get any public scrutiny of it. So Obama was able to do that without anyone even commenting on it. Which other administration was Taylor in? You said he was revolved in twice.
Yeah, in '92, he was in the administration, the Bush administration, and the first Bush, and but he exercised his power in the Clinton administration too. So the Republicans and the Democrats, both.
Monsanto shows the worst.
Monsanto's minions.
Monsanto shows the worst of the corporatocracy, of corporate government combined, putting profit before people and planet.
Right.
It really makes me viscerally upset.
Yeah. So there's so much to talk about. Maybe you could start out by talking about the Millions Against Monsanto campaign and some of the reasons why we should be protesting Monsanto.
Yeah, well, I think people all over the world are sick and tired of business as usual, and it's easier to organize. It's easier to conceptualize when you can personify the problem. And I think that's why Monsanto has become probably the most hated corporation on earth, not only in the United States, but all over the world.
That's a tough competition.
Yeah.
The most hated corporation on earth. There's a lot of them. but anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it's I think it's partly the arrogance of Monsanto. They spend millions of dollars a year on lying propaganda telling us how great genetically engineered foods are. They've changed the patent laws. They've avoided antitrust regulation, even though they've teamed up with their buddies to control most of the world's seed supply. They've directly contributed to 250,000 impoverished farmers in India committing suicide. They've sued 400 farmers in the United States who refused to buy their seeds and basically forced them either to pay huge penalties or to buy their seeds.
Wow.
I think this revolving door where people like Clarence Thomas, a former lawyer for Monsanto, gets to sit on the Supreme Court and decide whether Monsanto gets their way in federal lawsuits. People like Michael Taylor have just made people sick and tired of this.
Wow.
And so they have, risen up. We've created a massive alternative food and farming system in the United States and many countries across the world. Monsanto is polluting the farmland of organic farmers and farmers who choose not to use GMOs, and they've become quite hated. They've made statements to the press too that are just so outrageous, like telling the New York Times that, well, it's not the job of Monsanto to ensure that GMO foods are safe. Their job is to sell as much of it as possible. It's the job of the FDA to supposedly safeguard the public. But then when you look at it, the FDA says, we don't really safety test these genetically engineered foods from Monsanto and Dow and the rest. We just take their research and rely on that.
Wow.
And Monsanto actually has been around for a long time,
yes.
since I think 1901, as they started out as a chemical company. They have a long history of poisoning people and the planet and hiding the fact that they know that they're poisoning people on the planet. I think it's interesting that a whistleblower from Canada just came out Thierry, I'm blanking on his last name, I'll look it up, Vrain, I think, who was a researcher who talked about how the concern that we've now learned that when you create a new gene, you can't predict. It may make one protein that you want it to make, but you can't predict what other proteins it's going to make. Do you know some of the research behind the genetically engineered foods and the concerns about that?
And their safety?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, even Freedom of Information Act documents surrounding the FDA's investigation, they're pretty half-assed investigation of safety hazards of GMOs in the early 90s. FDA scientists themselves pointed this out that, this is somewhat of a hit-and-miss technology, this gene splicing. You don't really know what's going to happen. There's no way that we could say that these foods are substantially equivalent to non-genetically engineered foods. But the FDA bureaucracy, the powers that be, overrode even their own scientists who were pointing out the hazards of this. So it went forward. If you look at a website like earthopensource.org, you'll find hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that show the damage that genetically engineered foods and crops have done to animals, humans, and the environment ever since they were forced on the market. So there is literally no justification for these gene-spliced foods to remain on the market. They need to be pulled off. We need to devote our resources to developing a food and farming system that's sustainable and healthy.
Now, in Europe, they have... Now, Ronnie, you mentioned taking the GMOs out of the market. In Europe, there's been a lot more reaction to GMOs, both in labeling and restricting. And aren't some of the products that we get here that contain GMOs available in Europe without GMOs?
Exactly. The same companies in the United States that are hiding the fact that they have genetically engineered ingredients in their products, and these are all the big food corporations, Kellogg's, General Mills, ConAgra, the big food chains, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, with the Walmart, all these companies are GMO-free in the European Union. Now, why is that? Is that because genetically engineered crops and foods are banned in the European Union? Well, certainly the public wanted to do this in the late 1990s when GMOs first came on the market, but because they had been trapped into this World Trade Organization in Europe, the same as the United States and Canada, they weren't able to ban GMOs. It's very difficult to ban the genetically engineered crops, but they were able to follow the will of the people in the European Union and impose mandatory labeling. And what happened, starting in the late 90s, is grocery stores realized, oh my God, we're not going to sell products that have genetically engineered ingredients in them. Our customers would go crazy. The food processors, even the largest in the world, decided, well, we're not going to admit that any of our products have GMOs. And of course, then farmers saw that, we're not going to grow these crops because grocery stores won't sell them, food processors won't use them, the public doesn't like them.
Wow.
That's the reason why the battle in the United States over GMOs the last 20 years has centered around our right to know whether they are genetically engineered or not.
Right.
Wow.
Now we need to take
Wow, that's so just the people knowing is enough to shut the market down.
Right, if they can, we'll get into that. We need to take a quick break, and this song is called Just Say No to GMOs. It's sung by Mike Adams.
All right, Mike Adams, Just Say No.
I don't want to eat poison. I don't want gene mutations. at my dinner reservations. Pizza food abomination. What they doing to this fast food nation? They take artificial gene combinations, inject it in seed variations so they can grow their frankenfood imitations, while the side effects cause medical patients. Keep the profits alive while they're spraying all the food with name brand herbicides, and all the while they're spreading their lies. Monsanto destroy a farmer's lives, and the FDA just keeps it all going, saying it's safe even though they all know it's just poison, stealing away your life, and that's what you eat, genetically modified.
If you're caught with an ounce of cocaine, the chances are good you're going to go to jail. If it happens repeatedly, you may go to jail for the rest of your life. But evidently, if you launder nearly $1 billion for drug cartels and violate our international sanctions, your company pays a fine and you go home and sleep in your own bed at night. Every single individual associated with this. And I think that's fundamentally wrong.
You're listening to WEACT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at WEACT Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
June 27th is National HIV Testing Day.
HIV testing is fast, painless, and often free.
I've been tested for HIV.
I've been tested for HIV. Have you? To find an HIV testing center near you, visit greaterthan.org.
Hi, this is Chris Hedges, and when I'm in Washington, I don't want my news filtered through corporate sponsors. I want to hear the truth, which is why I listen to DC's only independent radio station, WEACT Radio, 1480 AM, WPWC, Washington's progressive working community. WEACT Radio, do something.
They don't want you to know. Poison they grow. Profits they show. GMO, no. Seeds that they sow. Gonna hurt us, we know. Told them to go. Say GMO, no.
Yeah, you're listening to Clearing the Fog, Speaking Truth to Expose the Forces of Greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese.
And our guest this morning is Ronnie Cummins, the director and founder of the Organic Consumers Association. We're talking about
Monsanto, a real corporate criminal. The first part of the show, Ronnie summarized the whole long list of crimes against Monsanto, and essentially
by Monsanto, yeah.
taking over the seed industry and buying up seed businesses, suing farmers, forcing genetically modified ingredients into our market and stopping any labeling efforts.
Yeah, and so, Ronnie, there have been some attempts on the West Coast to try to get foods labeled, and it's surprising the corporations that actually came out opposing labeling of GMO foods. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Similar to what happened in the late 1990s in the European Union, big food companies in the United States are now starting to question whether they should maintain their alliance with Monsanto and the biotech industry and prevent labeling. In California last November, there was a ballot initiative, a massive undertaking that nearly won, where 48.5% of Californians voted that they wanted mandatory labeling and a ban on companies being able to call foods natural that contain genetically engineered ingredients. Now, Monsanto and the biotech industry prevailed. They put in about $25 million, and then they convinced big food companies to put in another $20 million to basically brainwash and confuse many California voters. They ran TV and radio ads and sent direct mail to people's houses, basically repeating over and over again that, well, if you label genetically engineered foods, it's going to raise your grocery prices, it's going to hurt small farmers, it's going to increase the size of an intrusive bureaucracy in California, it's going to benefit special interests like organic farmers and trial lawyers. And so we did some polling right up until the day of the election, and we found that, the overwhelming majority of the public still want to know whether their food is genetically engineered or not. But if you scare them enough, if you brainwash them enough, they will vote against their instincts and their interests, and that's what happened in California.
So what were some of the companies that helped to fund this campaign that would surprise people?
Basically, all the big food companies in the country, but some of them have organic and natural food subsidiaries that people didn't realize, like Dean Foods, which is the largest dairy in the world. Their subsidiaries include Horizon Organic, White Wave Tofu, and Silk Soy Milk. People didn't realize every time you go buy your Silk Soy Milk, you're contributing money to a corporation that actually doesn't want you to know whether there's genetically engineered food ingredients in your food or not. A lot of people were shocked to learn that Coca-Cola, one of the largest contributors to the No campaign on labeling in California, owns Honest Tea, an organic tea company, or that naked juice you may have bought from a vending machine that you thought was quite natural compared to all the other junk, is actually owned by PepsiCo. General Mills, people learn, oh yeah, General Mills opposes labeling, at least in the United States, but they actually own Cascadian Farm and Mount Glen, important organic brands.
Right.
And so what we did after November 7th in California is we said, look, the reason why we lost the battle over labeling genetically engineered foods, which of course would have been the beginning of the end of genetically engineered foods in the United States.
Right.
The reason we lost is because we don't have any campaign finance regulation that makes any difference left in the United States. And we said, okay, well, we're going to do this again in Washington State with another ballot initiative in this year, 2013. So how are we going to prevent these big food corporations from throwing in another $20 million like they did in California?
Right.
And what we realized is don't hold your breath for the federal government to implement campaign finance reform anytime soon. We said, let's have our own form of campaign finance reform. Let's launch a boycott of these trader brands, calling attention to the fact that many of the organic and natural products, so-called natural products that people buy in the U.S. are actually parts of these large food conglomerates. And people went crazy. They attacked the websites of companies like Ben & Jerry's who pretend to be natural and green. They attacked the websites of Kellogg's and Kashi and Muir Glen and Cascadian and Honest Tea and all the rest of them. And these companies went into a panic. They realized, oh my God, this controversy over genetically engineered foods is getting out of hand. It's starting to affect our brand image that we put, hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars into establishing. We better rethink this thing. And so there was one thing that happened was Walmart stood up. Walmart had marketed genetically engineered sweet corn last summer. It had gotten a tremendous amount of flack for doing so. And so Walmart called all their buddies together in the big food corporations and said, let's go to Washington, let's have a closed-door meeting with some FDA bureaucrats who can communicate our wishes to the current administration, and let's discuss this. What happened behind closed doors, it was reported by us, by Grist Magazine, by the New York Times. What happened behind closed doors in Washington is that the big food companies said, you know what, I think we better allow labeling of genetically engineered foods. This is starting to undermine public confidence in our products and potentially could harm our trillion-dollar food industry in the U.S., our control over it. And so this was communicated loud and clear. They basically said at this closed-door meeting, Walmart and others, you know what, we're not going to put any money in Washington State in this next ballot initiative. If the biotech companies want to continue this battle, they're going to have to continue it alone. And I must say that so far in Washington State, the big food companies haven't put in any money at all. And it looks like we're going to be able to win on November 5th, the first state labeling laws.
Wow.
That's fantastic. And of course, that sets a precedent. U.S. companies are not going to just produce food for one state that's labeled. It may spill over.
Spill into other states.
We only have another minute, and I'm wondering, Ronnie, the big question that we keep getting asked is, because GE foods and soy and corn are, like 80-90% of our foods, how do people without, who aren't wealthy,
how do they protect themselves?
protect themselves from this?
From GMOs.
Yeah.
Well, one thing is to basically look for organic food and avoid processed foods. Almost all genetically engineered ingredients right now are in processed foods. So if you cook from scratch, the old traditional way, cook at home, have family meals, invite your friends over, you not only save money and get something healthier, but you're going to avoid the GMOs. The only whole foods that are genetically engineered in the United States right now are just a small amount of the crooked neck squash and papayas from Hawaii. Now, they're trying to get genetically engineered apples and genetically engineered salmon on the market, but right now they haven't. So your GMOs are in processed food. GMOs are primarily in animal feed for the animals on factory farms. So buy organic, cook from scratch, cook at home. When you go out to a restaurant, avoid meat and animal products, because they're coming from these factory farms where the animals were fed a steady diet of GMOs. But basically the public are waking up, and they're realizing that control over our food and farming system is part of this larger battle to reestablish a democracy, people's control over all the institutions and public policies that affect us. And if in the meantime the government at the federal level has been captured by the corporations, let's vote in our everyday lives with our consumer purchases. Let's create our own alternative media so that we can counteract the propaganda of the big corporations. And let's unite all the different issue groups together into a mighty force, because we're going to have a second American Revolution in order to have a safe and healthy food supply.
That's what it all comes down to, every issue. It comes down to democracy, people taking control of the media,
getting truth,
and building their own what they want, and popular resistance is really the big what needs to happen and uniting everybody in solidarity efforts. I appreciate that statement there, Ronnie. That's really exactly where we need to be going on every issue we deal with.
Yeah, Ronnie, thank you so much for taking time to be with us this morning. We encourage our listeners to check out the Organic Consumers Association and the Millions Against Monsanto campaign.
Those are two great websites, so check them out. There's lots of news on both those sites, and join and support this Washington State effort if you can.
That's right. Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
All right, you too.
All right, this next song is called Little GMO.
Little GMO.
By Rocket.
Little GMO, you're not a friend of mine. Yeah, I worry about you every time I dine. 'Cause they won't put a label on the food I buy. I'm gonna spit it out, shout it out, closing down GMO.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
This is Kimon Freeman, host of Speak Easy and co-founder of We Act Radio. Suicide is a very serious problem in today's challenging world, whether with our troops abroad or with everyday citizens within our own society. Before you take your life into your own hands, Tie a knot at the end of your rope and call the suicide hotline toll-free at 1-855-320-LIFE. That's 1-855-320-LIFE. It may just be the most important call you ever make. You talk, we listen, and together we survive.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
I speak from Pennsylvania's death row.
A bright, shiny, highly mechanized hell.
Mumia Abu-Jamal is one of the lost souls of the revolution.
And they're trying to figure out how to shut him down entirely.
They have moved heaven and earth to stop his voice being heard in the United States.
When you talk about groups that are maligned and slurred as terrorists in the major media, they're really small fry. They're retail terrorists. Wholesale terrorists are the United States government.
The whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to.
On the move. This is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Hi, I'm Tom Morello. Some call me the Night Watchman. And the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal is at a crucial stage. Please go to freemumia.com to find out more information about how you can help Mumia Abu-Jamal and other political prisoners. Night Watchman out.
You're listening to WEAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
GMO, you're made by Monsanto. You look like the real thing. There's no way I can know. You stole the patent from God now, so even he can't grow. Whoa, whoa. He wants to spit it out, shout it out, close him down, GMO.
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese.
And today we're talking about all the reasons to protest Monsanto in preparation.
Corporate criminal Monsanto.
That's right. We didn't even get into the depth of that, but we'll hope to do that some more. In this segment, we're joined by Patty Lovera. She's the Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch, and she coordinates the food team. Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking time to join us.
You guys do great work. I really appreciate your report, Monsanto, the corporate profile. That's really a great start. People should check that out on the website of the Food and Water Watch.
Yeah, so Patty, you're here in Washington, D.C., so I'm sure you're seeing up close and personal Monsanto's influence. Could you talk a little bit about that, about the Monsanto Protection Act that was signed into law?
Sure. So I think folks who are listening to your show are probably familiar that Monsanto is the biggest player in the field of genetically engineered crops. And you know, basically we have this scenario a lot where we have a new technology and the rules and regulations are way, way behind that technology and not able to protect the public, and that's totally true in the case of genetic engineering. So for a while now, the biotechnology companies, you know, really, and Monsanto always leads the charge, they've really feel that they're being victimized by the kind of pathetic review that happens at the USDA when they look at genetically engineered crops. Wow. Meanwhile, that review doesn't protect the environment. It doesn't protect the public. It's really, really inadequate, but it's too much. Even that little bit of regulation is too much for Monsanto. Right. So what they did is a bunch of different times last year in different bills, in the budget bill, in a draft of the farm bill last year, they had pieces of text in there that would basically take the courts out of the system, where if, you know, the USDA approves a GE crop and somebody goes to court to challenge it saying you didn't look at the environmental impacts, which has happened, it would basically take the court out of the equation there and let the crop get planted anyway. And then there were other suggestions to even fast track, to make it even faster to get these new crops on the market. Wow. So there were a couple attempts last year that didn't go through. But then a few months ago, when the government was about to shut down, the federal government was about to shut down, and Congress had to pass, you know, this must-pass piece of legislation, or the federal government would shut down, and, you know, all that chaos would erupt.
Right, this big crisis.
They slipped in one of those provisions, the part about taking the courts out of the equation, and that was kind of hitched a ride along with this big, massive piece of legislation to keep the whole federal government open. So hidden in there was this little bit that gave a gift to biotechnology.
Wow.
And that got through Barbara Mikulski's committee.
That's right. Yeah, she was taken to task a little bit for that. for not having greater transparency in the hearing on that. So we talked about Michael Taylor in the last segment with Ronnie Cummins, but there's another big food player in Washington, D.C. who comes from Monsanto, Tom Vilsack. Can you tell us about him and what he's been doing?
So Vilsack is the Secretary of Agriculture, so he runs the USDA, and that's the branch of the government that says, you're allowed to plant, genetically engineered corn or soy or whatever, new crop they're up to. So they have a lot of the action, when it comes to putting GMO crops into the grocery store. They're not going to get into the grocery store if they're not planted, and USDA is the one that says, yes, you can go ahead and plant this. So before he was the Secretary of Agriculture, he was the governor of Iowa. Mm-hmm. And he's largely been known as a friend to the biotechnology industry because Iowa is kind of the belly of the beast in terms of industrial agriculture.
I think they gave him some awards, too, for being the best biotech guy. Yeah.
Right, yeah, they're big fans. They were big fans of his work when he was governor, and they should be big fans of his work as USDA because this administration actually, the pace at which new GE crops are making it onto the market has really picked up. The Obama administration has approved a lot more of these crops than we'd seen in previous administrations.
That's what my sense also, and I was going to ask you about that. It really seems to me like this Obama administration has done more for GMOs and genetically modified foods getting in the market than any administration.
Well, Michelle's talking about organic.
While Michelle's doing a little organic garden in the White House, they're out there actually pushing the GMOs into the market.
It really it's kind of a schizophrenic moment. Yeah, you do have these two sides, and actually for a while, one of Vilsack was kind of has a standard stump speech. You'll see for 6 months or so he's saying the same stuff, and for a while, about a year ago, he kept talking about his two sons. And one son was industrial agriculture. He wouldn't say industrial, but using all these modern technologies, and the other son was organic and sustainable, and he was just trying to find a way for them to coexist. And at one of his speeches, somebody stood up and made a comment and said, one of your sons is a bully. And he's actually hurting the other one, meaning that biotechnology and GE crops hurt organic and hurt sustainable. The contamination that spreads around, it makes, they don't get, they have a disproportionate share of the research, they have a disproportionate share of everything, and they actively hurt, organic farmers and organic products. So he stopped using that line after that. And they've done some, advisory committees and commissions and things where they talk about coexistence, and that misses the point because you can't coexist with GE crops because they don't stay put. They don't stay. You put them, there's drift, and it's really not a system where you're going to be able to have these two. We're going to have to make some decisions about what's going to be allowed to whether we're going to have sustainable and organic.
Right now, the Obama administration is pushing us in the wrong decision on that decision, unfortunately, and making it much more common. One thing Ronnie mentioned, I want to get your take on. There was a meeting, I guess, of some big businesses in the food market worried about labeling, and they had some behind closed doors meetings in Washington to discuss what I assume is a very watered down labeling provision to avoid these state level activities. What's your take on that meeting?
Well, I think it shows they noticed, right, that people want this. I mean, people have wanted GE labeling since these crops hit the market, but in the last, 2 years or so, there's been like kind of a resurgence and really just great, organizing on the ground all over the country. A lot of people saw it in California, but it's happening all over the place, right? I mean, half the states practically had a bill this year in their legislature. So these companies aren't stupid. They see what's coming, and at some point, somebody's going to pass one of these laws, probably in some state first. And so we absolutely have to watch this and make sure that the companies don't come out there and try to undercut it in some way. And it's always tricky because, yes, if they go one by one and stores start to do it, that's progress, but we don't want to settle for that because everybody deserves this labeling, not just shoppers at a certain store, not just shoppers who have access to Whole Foods or something like that. Everybody should get
Whole Foods in 2018.
Right. But at the same time, a federal law could actually be much weaker and trump the state laws.
Especially if it's being negotiated by our food czar and Secretary of Agriculture with a bunch of big business interests behind closed doors.
So we have to be careful.
What do we expect from the federal government? I mean, do you expect them to do something useful or something watered down?
I think it depends how many states go first, and how much pressure we keep on them. And that's, it's all of our jobs. We're going to have to watch it. We absolutely have to watch that process and make sure that it's real, that what they're putting out there is real. So there is a federal bill on both, there's in both the House and the Senate now there's a bill that's a starting point, and it's something to organize around, and then you have to be careful the whole way through. With anything, we have to be careful.
But couldn't this be done? This could really be done by regulation. So the Obama administration really could issue regulations on this. It don't even requires a federal bill. They could recognize that these kinds of products need to be labeled labeled.
The science is there.
The science is there, and they could and come up with some crappy thing before any states act. I mean, I just have no expectation the Obama administration would do anything that'd be helpful to the consumers on this, and maybe I'm just too pessimistic, but. Or maybe
well, I mean, we don't have labeling because of federal policy. I mean, there was actively a decision not to require it, and so that could be reversed. I think that at this point we're at a stage where we need to be putting pressure on everybody at every level,
that's right?
And so I think that's what people are really stepping up, and it's really exciting to see all of this organizing going on all over the place at every level, and I think that's what's going to take. And the fact that those companies had their secret meeting, absolutely, we got to watch it, right? Because plenty of bad things could come out of it. But it also does show that they've noticed. Right?
No, exactly. No, I'm very impressed with the way the grassroots has been picking up. I think the California initiative was a help to add. It was already going on before that, but that just added to it. And then seeing all that money pour in, opposing it.
So obvious.
Just made it show that there was some political power here. And now this Washington State initiative could put it over the edge and start to make it really happen.
So in the last few minutes that we have you with us, can you tell us about what Food and Water Watch is doing and how our listeners can get involved?
Sure. So we have all kinds of stuff on our website, which is foodandwaterwatch.org. So we're trying to spread the word however we can. So we've got tons of materials on the website. We actually recently did a corporate profile of Monsanto that you mentioned, just because everybody knows their name, and there's usually more that you didn't even know about how bad they are.
Sure is.
We learned quite a bit.
The more we read, the angrier we get.
The hardest part about writing that report was keeping it short. There was so much material. So we think there's a ton for people to spread the word and learn about. We always have actions on there. So we have a lot of different actions you can take depending on where you live for labeling, getting USDA to change the way they regulate these crops. We're still fighting, trying to prevent genetically engineered salmon. We've done a ton of work on that, and there's always actions up there about that. So it's kind of a good place to start. And then we have organizers in different states all over the country, and so if people go there, they can get hooked up with stuff that's going on at their local level.
Great.
There's a big Monsanto protest day coming up on the 25th.
May 25th, International, and I have to give a plug for the OccuCards. The Monsanto OccuCard is another, talk about keeping it short. They distilled it down to a very small postcard, but it's a great starter educational tool.
It's a real good one. That
people can order and pass out at their protests. So thank you for joining us, Patty, and keep up the great work. We really appreciate what you're doing. We're going to go into this last break with a song called Monsanto, Go Away.
Monsanto, go away. Sounds like a reasonable request to me.
That's what we're going to be saying on May 25th.
It's a food abomination. What they're doing to this fast food nation. They take artificial gene combinations, injected in seed variations, so they can grow their frankenfood imitations, while the side effects cause medical patients. Keep the profits alive while they're spraying on the food, name brand herbicides, and all the while they're spreading their lies. Monsanto destroy a farmer's lives, and the FDA just keeps it all going, saying it's safe, even though they all know it's just poison
Say you want to help our community, help the farmers grow more food, but all you sell to us is lies. You're only looking out for you. You say it's all about the children, but you feed them pesticides. We know that it's all about your profits.
Yeah,
because of you, too many die. Monsanto, go away, go away, go away. The earth, she gives us all we need to live and to sustain. We will not grow your chemical crops, take your herbicides and go. You will not poison our homeland. We say it's time for you to go. Monsanto, go away, go away, go away. You are not welcome on our land. Monsanto, go away, go away, go away. You are trespassing on our land. Traitors to the earth, traitors to the truth, traitors to our children, traitors to our life, traitors to the earth. Gives us all we need to live and to sustain. We will not grow your chemical crops, take your herbicides and go. You will not poison our homeland. We say it's time for you to go. Monsanto, go away, go away, go away. You are not welcome on our land. Monsanto, go away, go away, go away. You are trespassing on our land. Traitors to the earth, traitors to the truth, traitors to our children, traitors to our life, traitors to the earth, traitors to the truth.
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese.
And this morning we're talking about Monsanto. In preparation for the big International Day of Protest, we've so far spoke with Ronnie Cummins of the Organic Consumers Association and Patty Lovera from Food and Water Watch.
Now we're going to have an old friend, Adam Eidinger. Not that he's old, but we've known each other well. In fact, we got arrested at the Department of Justice, I think, on a medical marijuana protest probably 15 years ago or something? Anyway, something like that.
About 10 years ago.
How many?
About 10, I think 11 years ago.
11 years ago, okay. You're better than I am. Adam is with Mintwood Media Collective, and he's been involved in the Monsanto issue for quite a while. He's organizing Occupy Monsanto. Why don't you tell us about Occupy Monsanto? Now we've heard all this negative stuff about Monsanto, a corporation that we really can't stand. What can we do about it?
Well, Occupy Monsanto has been focusing on organizing demonstrations at Monsanto facilities, at the Food and Drug Administration, as well as other targets that make sense, really since January of 2012. In September of 2012, we spearheaded worldwide protests. There were about 70 protests worldwide that took place on the first anniversary of the Occupy movement, which was September 17th. And since then, there's also been at the Monsanto shareholder meeting. I actually spoke the last 2 years at the Monsanto shareholder meeting on behalf of resolutions.
I saw that video. That was pretty cool. You did a good job.
We snuck video into the meeting. It's a video free meeting, but since in the state of Missouri you can record without permission, I was able to sneak a camera in and shed a little bit of transparency on this meeting. At this point, we're really focused on just supporting any and all protests on the GMO issue. We are very active right now with this march against Monsanto that's going to take place worldwide at 2 p.m. on May 25th. That's a Saturday. This was an action called by some activists right after the Monsanto Protection Act, which maybe you talked about that earlier.
About that, yeah.
That sort of was a wildcat viral effort on Facebook that quickly the people who called for it came to us and said, we'd love your help because you guys have been organizing this. So right now I think there's 280 protests scheduled worldwide.
Excellent.
And it's just a lot of momentum around the issue. People are really waking up to what they're eating, and we're encouraging people to go out and protest at least once a month, and that's been about our average. We usually organize at least one protest a month, and whether it's a day of action or whether it's just here in Washington, D.C.
We cover a lot of those protests on our Occupy Washington, D.C. site and spread the word about it. And what this radio show we're going to do, Adam, is we're going to do an article for Truth Out, which we publish next week before the protest, to try to generate more activity. So that's one of the goals here, is to really build this up. And I love that you guys have been doing this consistently, because it's campaigns that make a difference. You know, it's
sustained pressure.
Sustained and building pressure, and that you've gone from 70 now to 280 protests shows that you're having an impact. What do you see the grassroots growing across the country on this? Is it starting to get more momentum?
Totally more momentum. I think what you're seeing is more and more parents, particularly mothers, that are stepping up and saying, we really want to know what's in our food. I mean, we want labeling right now, let alone maybe a ban on these crops, on this whole sort of chemically intensive industrial agriculture. Right. People really are concerned. And so I think, I do think we have momentum. I also think a lot of people that come out to these, demonstrations, they say, I'm not an occupier. I'm not with the Occupy movement. And we even get this repeatedly, why don't you change your name to something a little more family friendly? Well, ironic because we often do family-friendly protests. We just did one at the FDA. It was called Stone Soup, and we cooked a very large pot, like a 50-gallon pot of soup, right in front of the FDA, and people came in from as far away as the Midwest and New England and down south. And we had about 300 people come.
Wow.
And everybody brought their food, and we cooked the food together, and we spent the whole day there. And we even got a formal response to an invitation to the Stone Soup from the head of the FDA, Hamburg. Yes, and the response was, "I'm sorry, I can't attend," but it was nevertheless a formal response.
Too far.
And since then we've been demanding a meeting with citizens at the FDA. They meet with companies like Dow and DuPont and Monsanto regularly on things. Why not meet with some citizens that are actually demonstrating and are concerned? And we are trying to still schedule that meeting. We got another response saying that they are working on scheduling a meeting. But what's really tragic about all this is that a lot of these people who are coming out supported President Obama on this labeling issue.
That's right.
And they feel really burned now. They feel that this administration has turned their backs on a promise they made. And labeling GMOs is only asking what they're doing in other countries. It's not a ban on research. It's not a ban on even growing the crops. It's just transparency. And one of the arguments that appeals to a lot of libertarians who are also critical of Monsanto is that the market doesn't function properly unless people have all the information about what they're buying.
Right.
And you can believe in the free market and labeling at the same time, because if the free market is about deceiving people and hiding things and not being clear about what your ingredients are, then it's not really a free market. It's a corrupted market. It's a market based on misinformation.
Is there an Occupy Monsanto website?
Yes, it's just occupy-monsanto.com, and we're the top-ranked activist site for the GMO issue right now on most search engines, so it's really easy to find us. And we have really started. We started from nothing, just as one small affinity group, and now there's a pretty big network that's just growing and growing. And we consider this movement to be decentralized, meaning that anybody can call their own demonstration. And we maybe only call about a quarter of the demonstrations we participate in, because when someone has a good idea for a demonstration, we jump in. And when there was an emergency call by Food Democracy Now! For a protest at the White House a couple months back, when the continuing resolution was passed, we jumped into that, and it was strategic. Sometimes you don't need a big protest to garnish national media attention, and the Monsanto Protection Act is not what the act is called. That was just the messaging of the demonstrators that caught on and went all the way to, you could thank Jon Stewart really for taking it to the national audience, and then eventually all mainstream media took it to the national audience. So
you've always been very good at creative demonstrations and getting the message out. So that's one of your people people interested in any issue should check out the Occupy Monsanto website just to get ideas for how to do it right.
Yeah, well, that was one of my questions, and I mean, one thing about Monsanto people may not be aware of is that some of our top Superfund sites are Monsanto sites.
That's right.
Because they did start out as a chemical corporation and have created some pretty big messes. But Adam, what are some of the places that people can or are protesting in their local communities? I mean, not everybody can come to the FDA or the USDA.
What are some good venues that you'd recommend to people who want to be creative?
Are there certain banks that back Monsanto, or are there certain other corporations that can be disrupted or protested?
Well, we haven't targeted banks yet, but on our website we have a facilities page where we have every single Monsanto subsidiary and actual Monsanto facilities nationwide, and they're practically in every state. They're really, you don't have to drive too far to find a Monsanto facility. They have a near monopoly. They're going for a monopoly on certain crops. So I think it's really about researching it. I mean, if you live in Hawaii, for instance, there are field trials of GMO crops going on all over the island, on all the Hawaiian islands.
Wow.
And people there want them out. They don't want their public land to be leased to Monsanto, so they're focusing on evicting Monsanto.
Oh, great.
And like I said, we targeted the FDA because the FDA is in our own backyard.
Right.
But if you're, say, out in San Francisco, well, people are going to federal office buildings and demonstrating there. And it's, one demonstration is not going to get us what we want. It's not going to get us GMO labeling. It's not going to ban GMOs in one demonstration. But, it's just, like you said earlier, it's a sustained pressure and doing creative things. If you've done something once before and it went okay, it probably won't go better the next time. You really need to constantly come up with new concepts for a demonstration. We have supported civil disobedience. Members of, people that affiliated with Occupy Monsanto were arrested in Oxnard this past September, and they actually shut down a Monsanto factory where they packaged seeds. It was about a 1,200-person factory. Three gates that served their ship receiving. All three gates were locked down and took over 6 hours before those gates were reopened after arrests were made. There is a role for civil disobedience here, and we've done food dumps. We've gone to Trader Joe's, for instance, which says just trust us that our foods are non-GMO, but they have no transparency. There's no third-party certification, and we want. We're not just going to trust a company, even Trader Joe's, which has a good reputation to a lot of. They've got to be clear. They've got to have transparency. We feel that Whole Foods, for instance, also we were targeting them in the past year. We feel that Whole Foods has done a really big thing, a really big service for the GMO campaigners by saying in the future they're going to require.
Yeah, why so far in the future?
Yeah, why 2018?
I feel like it's okay to give them a little bit of slack because this is they have to create a third bin. Right now, all the grain silos in America have organic bins, and they have conventional bins, which means GMO is mixed in there. Mostly GMO, probably.
Right.
Well, if you're going to have to segregate your non-GMO crops from your conventional crops, that means you have to have another storage facility for it. And these investments to build these silos, these are factored over a number of years. They're going to use that silo. It's not inexpensive to build the storage. You're going to have to invest. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to give plenty of time to farmers. We don't want to hurt farmers.
Right.
A lot of I've met plenty of farmers at the Monsanto shareholder meeting that swear that these crops are better for the environment and better for food costs, and they have all these reasons for supporting it. But when you say, well, I want non-GMO to be labeled, they say, well, I'm going to have to separate those crops, and that's going to cost me money and time. And they're really hung up on that. And people like Ronnie Cummins and others have said to me that it's not a major cost, and that it's really they're overblowing it. But these are big companies. Like Whole Foods is a big company, and they have a big supply chain. And to reach back into their supply chain on all these different ingredients and to get transparency, it's not an easy task. And so it took 20. I like to say it took 20 years to get into this mess. The GMOs have been sort of unleashed for about 20 years, and it's going to take a few years to get out of it.
Yeah. So what do you see? What do you see as the next big events in the next year or so for the movement? How do you see this movement building its energy up? I
think May 25th will be very big, and it's just going to be. We're going to break new ground with the amount of demonstrations taking place on the same day. But then also July 4th, at least 100 actions are planned at July 4th parades where people are going to be leafleting about the GMO issue and reminding people of the President's pledge to label GMOs. And then after that, this coming November in Washington State, a very important ballot initiative will be voted on to label GMOs, and we are doing everything we can to help that get passed. So I think this is a big year. We got to pass GMO labeling at a state level if we want to get serious at a federal level.
Right. Although, as we mentioned earlier in the show a couple of times, they did have a meeting recently behind closed doors with the feds and big business to talk about labeling. So they're already feeling some pressure.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that people are engaging in some civil disobedience and shutting down the Monsanto factories, because I think people are getting it with the oil and gas industry, that we have to shut them down. It's going to take some disruption of Monsanto, and this is just as big of a problem.
Oh, it's
what
serious.
Monsanto
Our
is
food
doing
supply, yeah,
as
only slightly serious.
As our oil and gas industry. But I want to remind people about the OccuCards, the Monsanto OccuCard that you can download yourself and print, or you can order copies of it to pass out at your protest.
Right in front of your face here, that way people will see it.
There we go. Sorry, Adam. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us again. Can you give that website again?
Sure. It's just occupy-monsanto.com.
Great. Well, thank you. Keep up the great work.
We should thank some people.
Yes, we'd like to thank every week we say we're going to do this and we forget to thank our wonderful engineers, Peter Callahan and Kimon Freeman. And it's Kimon's birthday. Happy birthday, Kimon.
He's only 22. He's doing a lot of work.
He's amazing. All right. We're going to wrap up with Junkyard Empires. We want the people organized.
Can build the kind of
future we want.
This is Margaret Flowers.
And I'm Kevin Zeese. Join us every Monday morning at 11 a.m. for Clearing the Fog.
Speaking truth to expose the forces of greed.
Start the week with your eyes open.
The fog.
The forces of greed that spin news stories for the benefit of the 1%.
Each week we feature guests who are working to expose these truths and offer real solutions to the current crises we face.
Knowledge is power, and with knowledge you will be empowered to act to shift the power to the people.
Monday mornings at 11 a.m. on weactradio.com or 1480 a.m.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
And initially this was down out of an IRS office in Cincinnati, but it appears to have spread. So there are a lot of questions about, okay, how high up did this go? You already have a lot of conservatives complaining that this is Watergate, this is dirty tricks, this is an impeachable offense of the president, except that, unlike, say, in Watergate, there's no evidence at all that President Obama or any of his top aides even knew about this, or that even his appointees at the IRS knew about this. This just appears to be some lower-level IRS officials who were engaging in a sort of snooping and demanding audits and whatnot. But it's a big problem, and I think we can all agree